And it's cliche to say, but when you're in the middle of adversity, it sucks, you hate it, and you just want to be done with that. But I am finding the more I go through it in my career, and by the way, I'm in the middle of a tough moment right now. Like our business is complicated with global supply chain.
Yeah.
Like it's a total nightmare. And yet my perspective went from 10 years ago, like this sucks, this is heavy, I hate this, to this is a pretty interesting problem to solve that's never happened in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And this can be written one of two ways. It can be a success or a failure. So we're going to write the success. And I'm going to be intrigued by this problem that I get to solve, because not only does it not feel so heavy, but I start to enjoy the challenge, and I can actually learn from a difficult moment as opposed to just wanting to be done with it.
And welcome to the One Shot Podcast. All right, so you got three former athletes, right? And their protein consumption is abnormal, abnormally high. Yeah. And I think we really gravitate towards red meat typically, the three of us.
The reddest.
Anyways, one thing that we have all fully dove into is how we prepare our meat.
Right.
And our guest today, which we're humbled that he would spend the time with us, but is the name behind the brand that we all know. I mean, whether it's Joe Rogan, whether it's Meat Church, anybody, if you're following anybody on social media, you've seen this brand, and that brand is Traeger. But we got to say to you, and I know, and I've digging into prior to this conversation, as you were doing some diligence on Traeger before you took over as a CEO, some of the things that people would say were, this product is the best product I have, and it's changed my life.
Yeah.
And I can attest to that. It's literally changed my life.
I'm on it 2 to 3 nights a week at least. That's on a down week. I've even got my Traeger hat. I mean, I'm this is the most excited I've been doing it.
Yeah. Hey, shout out to Michael Davis for sending us those hats, man.
I'm so glad he did.
So we are joined by Jeremy Andrus, the CEO of Traeger Grills. Stepped in, and I'm going to let you give a little bit more background on how you got to Traeger and then what those early years in Traeger were. But 2014 was your first year there, correct?
Yep. Actually, January 17th, I believe, was my first day. And so it's like 8 years in a week since I showed up.
Oh, man.
That is awesome.
You've done some big things in 8 years in a week. I'll tell you that.
It feels like these are dog years. It feels like decades, honestly.
So we're going to go back. We're going to go back on your story. But before we do that, did you have a Traeger before you took the job?
No, I didn't. And it's interesting. And where you just started was why I really fell in love with Traeger. It's you always want to do something that's important to people, right, that's meaningful to people, and as well, I was as an entrepreneur, having co-founded a business called Skull Candy, brand called Skull Candy. I had this appreciation for what it takes to really make a product or a brand truly resonate with a consumer. If you think about the hundreds of brands and products that we interact with every day, they're sitting all around me. Most of them do exactly what they're supposed to do, but they're not special to me. They're not important to me. Mm-hmm. And so when I heard that comment that you just made for the very first time, my Traeger changed my life. I said, like, what do you do? I put my pen down and I said, say that again. Like, first of all, this is a backyard grill.
Yeah.
And I was grilling on an old Weber. It was fine, but it wasn't important to me. And I heard that, and then I heard it again, and I heard it again. I said, there's magic here. And I want to be a part of this. Like I want to be one of those brands that people want to tell their friends about.
Yeah.
And so it blew me away from literally the very first day. And I had never heard of this brand before. 27 years in, I'd never heard of it.
Well, the magic is, food is so emotional for us as people. It's community, it's time to gather. And so for me, I'll speak for myself, my Traeger is my time with my family. Yeah. It's time that we can hang out in the backyard and just enjoy each other. And so it really does. It sounds crazy to say it's changed my life, but it really has, because of those times of connectedness that I get with my family while we're using the Traeger. It's beyond just a cooking utensil or a cooking device. Yeah. It truly is a moment and a time that we see as special.
Yeah, that experience is what every brand hopes to like. That an experience like that's what every brand hopes to create. And yet most brands are still they're transactional. They're selling stuff. They're selling items. And we learned very early on, and we developed this brand promise, which speaks to exactly what you just said. And it's our promise is to bring people together to create a more flavorful world. And the bringing people together part, that's like this human experience of being connected with people you care about. When you cook for them, it's like even more so. People almost can't believe, Dad, you did this brisket? Right. Where did you buy it? Like, no, I did this. And then there's this, they're not only high fives, but there's appreciation that you cared enough to do it. And so this flavorful world piece of it is, it's not just like the flavor of the food, which of course is very important to what we do, but it's the richness of a life well lived. And we want our brand to stand for that, because at the end of the day, what do people really crave in life? Community, connection in their family, their backyard, their neighborhood. That's right. And so we just want to be part of that connection process.
Well, that's awesome. And I want to say one more thing, just, bragging on your brand and what you've created before we go back to the beginning and get to your journey and how you came to where you're at today. But one of the things that I love about the brand that you've created, and like you, I hadn't heard of Traeger really until 4 or 5 years ago.
Same here.
And so one thing that I've experienced and people that I've spoken with have experienced is you've created a brand that is the anti-Apple concept, where it's not, hey, I'm going to upgrade it and you got to buy a new unit and you got to buy this. We want to make sure that you're happy with what you have and that lasts you for as long as physically possible. If there is an issue, which there always is, right? There's always some sort of, any kind of machine, there's some sort of mechanical breakdown. But the fact that your team and support staff goes over and above in making sure that they make it right so that you can get back and cooking again. And that's just so different, right? That's just so different than today. It's like, okay, where can we get more revenue? How can we squeeze more revenue out of our customers?
Yeah, look, it's this is something that we talk a lot about, and it's that great brands are about a consistent touch point every single time. Every time a consumer interacts with the brand, whether it's on the website, at retail, with service, even opening the box and unboxing it, every touch point is high quality, and it makes sense. It resonates, and it's interesting. I just got a phone with or Zoom with an executive of a very large, well-known 150-year-old global brand. And I was sharing an experience that I had. And I said, boy, when this happened, and I was just giving feedback, it was so surprising to me because that's not how I knew your brand. And this is something that we talk about over and over and over. It's how do we make sure that the only surprise moment is a surprise and delight moment. Every touch point a consumer says, that's how I expect to be treated by Traeger. This is how Traeger does it. That's powerful.
That is.
I love that.
Yeah, well said.
So let's go back, Andrew. Let's go back to Jeremy Andrews.
You on a last name basis now?
I am. I am.
Hey, that's how it was in the locker room, right?
That's how we do it in the locker room.
Andrus. Hey, take us back, Andrus.
Hey, do you know my high school nicknames as well? Let's go.
So let's go back. Let's go back to your childhood and where you were born and your upbringing. Where were you born?
Boy, when people ask where I'm from, I say the East Coast because I went to junior high school in Boston and high school in DC. But honestly, I've lived all over the world. I was born in the Midwest, lived in Europe a couple of times. And so, it's funny I say the East Coast, but I've experienced so much, and travel was an important part of my upbringing. I moved to England when I was 10 years old, and we didn't have much money, but every time my dad had a business trip, as opposed to hopping on the train or buying a plane ticket, we hopped in the back of the station wagon and we drove. And we got on the ferry and went to Europe. And so I say that because, one of the things that has really informed my perspective on life is having seen the world through a different set of eyes, having, trekked through slums in India and in Mumbai, lived in the Middle East, having spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia. And you get this perspective on the world that I didn't have my first 10 years growing up in a small town in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's something I connect with you on, and I've said this before, but I was born in another country as well, and I lived the first 5 years of my life, and then we would travel all the time to Brazil, and that's the greatest gift my parents ever gave. I mean, they gave me a ton of great things, but the greatest gift they gave me was a perspective of a life outside of what I grew up in, and understanding that there is a bigger world than your 2-mile radius block that you spend most of your time in.
That's such an important thing as a parent. We have 6 young children, and when they turn 8 years old, we start to travel with them internationally once a year. And it's not to Paris and to London. We recently took them to Northern Africa. And it's not just the tourism on the beaten path. We find a place to do service, an orphanage to spend time. We've taken them on vision projects in Peru. And what you don't want them to believe, and we live in this really great bubble, our neighborhood and our school, it's like so pristine and perfect, but that's not how most of the world lives.
Yeah.
And I think for children to grow up understanding what the world's really like, it's not only good for their view on life, but suddenly they start to appreciate some of the things that they think just grow on trees. And it's like there's a level of maturity, I think, when you've had an experience like you've described, that I just want our kids to understand what the world's really like.
Yeah, I actually listened to a sermon this morning talking about this, and it goes along with what you're saying. We've lost our sense of awe and wonder in certain ways. We get so wrapped up in, having the biggest house on the block and having the best job and the CEO title, which are all great things. And they're not bad things. Yeah. But we forget about the awe and the wonder that's out there if you get outside of your bubble.
100%. Like I have this conversation frequently because I'm a believer in simplicity in life. And, I have a lot of friends who've been successful entrepreneurs, and they have multiple homes. They fly private everywhere. They own airplanes, and it's like you reach out, hey, do you want to partner on a plane? Do you want to buy, you want to do something at the Four Seasons and wherever it may be? And the answer is we're good. And there's nothing wrong with having those experiences, but simplicity in life so that you can enjoy, what I do 2 or 3 times a week, for example. I'm 10 minutes from the mountains. When there's snow on the ground, I'm out there at 5 a.m. running up a mountain with a headlamp on and my micro spikes on. And you look down and you've beat the world out of bed. And it's like, you talk about awe and wonder. How about like looking down from a mountain a couple of times a week? And that doesn't cost anything except calories. And so it is interesting in life is like you can become very ambitious, and then you can let life get very complicated. And it's something that I really try and step back and think about. I remember sitting with my grandfather, for example. I live 100 yards from the house that my grandfather built brick by brick back in the 40s. And I have no idea how we ended up so close to where he lived. But he was a blue collar guy, worked 3 jobs to take care of a family of 6 children. And he just believed in simplicity. And he worked hard, but he was always happy. And being able to find the beauty in life in a world that has so much noise, you're always connected to your device. Your AirPods are never far away, and you've got all this noise, but being able to step back and feel the presence of a moment, I just think is so important.
Yeah.
It's something that you have to focus on every day.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And with both of you. And one of the things that I love about traveling internationally, serving internationally, is that, you get to see things and you see different perspectives, right? And your perspective of life changes. But for me, what I love is just the restoration of like your faith in humanity. Because you look at people that have so little, that are so grateful and gracious. I mean, we spent time in Guatemala City, and the people there that literally live on top of a trash dump, the fact that you would come an American would come spend their time just to talk with them, just to like hear them and listen to them. Like, you would have thought that you just took them to, a 5-star restaurant, bought them dinner, and put them up at the Ritz-Carlton, and just by spending time, and just the gratitude and appreciation from people that have so little, and it just really does make look at our lives, like how trivial, like we're so stressed over all these things, and all these things bring us down. And I mean, look at like our depression levels in our country and all the things that we struggle with mental health. Yet we have so much, and we just have lost sight on what the perspective of life could be in a simpler form.
Love it. I love it.
That's great.
Yeah, I totally agree. I needed to hear that today. Thank you.
All right. Well, okay. So let's keep going. So you move over to Europe, spend some time in Europe, and then you come back to the East Coast, grow up in DC and
Minnesota.
And Boston.
Boston. That's right. Boston.
I say I'm East Coast. I'm total West Coast guy. Like the East Coast is kind of like my roots are there, but when I go back, I'm reminded of why the East Coast has earned its reputation.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
It's a little bit rough around the edges. And I came west. I've lived west for most of my adult life now, and actually, if you look at my career, I mean, like I was after college all over the place. I was day trading stocks full time for 6 months. I was starting a frozen beverage supply business in Dallas, actually. In a rough experience as an entrepreneur. I was building real estate all over the place. And it's interesting to look back, the last 17 years of my career have been defined by 2 things that were very meaningful. And, I eventually found my way in life, but I'll tell you the first 10 years, disaster. I mean, you look at my resume and say, boy, you've got way too many logos for the number of years on there. And so, the journey's been incredible, and it's, you learn so much by doing it. And it's funny, I don't look back and begrudge or regret any of those times, because you are made by the adversity that you go through.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go back either.
Right. I like where I'm at today. Yeah. We're grateful that you're there. That's for sure.
Those first 10 years when you were dabbling and doing different things, what were your goals? Like, what were you hoping that you turned into one day?
So it's an interesting question. I've always wanted to be a CEO and an entrepreneur. And since I was a kid, I mean, I bought a lawnmower when I was 8 years old and started a lawn business. Started paper route at 7 when my sister was 8.5, like in Minnesota at 4:30 in the morning in the middle of winter. I wanted to make money. I wanted to build something. I was always writing business plans. I didn't call them business plans because I didn't know what that was. But, from a young age, there were things that I wanted to do in life. And fast forward to when I graduated from college, And I had a strategy, and I was a few months out of college and realized I was unhappy and my career wasn't going anywhere. And, I was questioning everything, and I wanted, and with each move, I wanted to find what I loved. And so, it's like, and the list goes on, but it's interesting to look back and, think about what did I learn as the word dabbled is the right one. I mean, I never stopped working. I was working hard, but I was definitely not getting anywhere. And at the time it was discouraging, and I felt like my career was a failure. And it's interesting looking back, there was actually real value in each of those moments. They were like real lessons. And it's one of the things that I really internalized along the way, which is, you keep your feet moving, and not to use a football analogy, but you're a running back, you keep your feet moving, and eventually you find the hole.
Right.
And it may not feel like you're going north south, but you get there. And I was just a big believer in learning from each experience, so that I didn't look back and say that was a waste of time and a failure.
Yeah. So basically your mentality, sounds like you're a self-starter. You've always been a self-starter.
100%.
So where did you get that from? Is that from your mother or your father? Because those are experiences that you've probably have witnessed throughout your life.
Yeah. There's no question there's DNA. I mean, my father became a successful entrepreneur, and yet growing up, I remember I grew up lower middle class for much of my life, and he made money later on. But no question, it's part of the DNA. But it's also interesting for me to think about, there is a nature component, but there's a nurture component as well. And if I wanted Nike shoes, and as the second child, my parents didn't make much money. Like, it was on me to earn and to go buy them. And it's interesting. And there were 5 children in our family, and, we grew up differently. My older sister and I grew up the early days where, we worked and we paid for our gas and insurance in our car. And the younger siblings, this is not a knock on my younger siblings. It's just like, it was what they were served up in life. But I do think that the nurture component made me hungry. And I remember appreciating the first time I bought Nike shoes. And by the way, I later realized that the swoosh went the wrong direction, so they were
Got him.
Kmart.
But I didn't know it at the time. And like, for $8 in the late 70s, what do you expect?
Right.
But I remember wearing them to bed until my parents said, these are worn. You can't wear these to bed anymore. And I grew up really appreciating those things because I worked for them. So it's a little bit of both. And boy, that's something I think a lot about with my own children.
Man, I love that.
Because they grew up differently than I did.
Isn't it so funny? It's really funny. I think any individual boy or girl that is on the older side of siblings would have that exact same story. Like, you guys, like, we had to mow the lawn, we had to do all the work. Yeah. You didn't have to do it, and you just got a car. And I mean, I think that's so common. It's so funny. It cracks me up.
That experience, and it's interesting, and you want to recreate that for your children, and it's a different generation, and it's a hard thing as a parent as well. It's like, how do you provide and create opportunity, but nurture the hunger in them?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and this generation is so different, and you brought up a point earlier that we've talked about quite a bit. Is when you're at a point in your career, and you mentioned it, it's like, hey, I didn't feel like I was going anywhere. Where is that line in your mind that you say, okay, this is where I now need to pivot and go somewhere else, as opposed to continuing to push through, right? The example of a miner, he's digging and he's digging and he's digging and he's digging, and then he stops right before he gets to the diamond. So in your mind, when does that apply? All right, we're going to take a quick break from the episode and recognize an opportunity that we all have. If you are having a hard week or you just need some R&R, here's what you got to do is you got to drive up 75 north, cross the Red River to Durant, Oklahoma, to Choctaw Casino and Resort. It is the best getaway that you can get if you're in the Dallas area by far. And guess what? If you're listening from somewhere outside of DFW, say you're in South Texas or you're in another state, which we've got some listeners in other states, fly into Dallas, drive up. It is worth every penny. You don't have to go to Vegas anymore to have a world-class experience at a world-class resort and casino.
Yeah, we talk about the restaurants that are up there, those steakhouses. We talk about the concert venue. We had a conversation with Aaron Watson previously, and he talked about the intimacy. Every single seat in that concert venue is right on top. And there's not a bad seat in the house.
There's not.
And so these artists talk about it's one of the best places to play. And so go check out yourself a concert, the spa, the brand new expansion. I mean, it's just such a good time. To your point, Tyler, if you need a break, things are getting crazy, times are tough, get up there, get up to Choctaw Casino Resort, have yourself a great time. We experience it. We love it. They're doing great things in the community. Can't say enough good things, and we're so grateful for their partnership. That's Choctaw Casino Resort. Go check them out. Now back to the episode.
I wish there was a magical formula, but I'll tell you a story of something that happened that about. And actually, when I learned it, it caused me to go back and ask this question about different moments of my life. My family and I invested in Traeger in late 2013. And then in early 2014, I went to run the business as CEO. And it was an incredibly difficult experience. The majority owner and I saw the world very, very differently. And I'll leave it at that. But we had different styles and different beliefs on how to build a business and how to treat people and how to build a team. And I came to this moment, sort of 10 months in, where it was just a devastating moment. We'd managed to buy the rest of the business. We got him out. It was ours to build. And we made a change in our business with our supply chain team. And actually, our mutual friend, Mr. Davis, arrived not long after this. But we decided to outsource our supply chain operation because that's very common in this world today, especially for a growing business. And that meant that we were going to have to let go everyone that worked in our warehouses. And so, we let them know that we gave them 8 weeks. We gave them job opportunities with UPS, who we were partnering with. We gave them time off of work to go and find jobs. And then we offered them severance if they got to the end of this 8 weeks and it didn't work out. And the next time I showed up at the office, there was a fire truck and a police car, and one of our trucks was on fire. It had been doused with fuel, and it was melting to the ground. And I remember asking a little bit of a different question in the moment. I'm like 3 hours into this. I remember walking into a bathroom, locking the door, washing my face, and saying, "What a freaking disaster."
Where am I right now?
This is a disaster. I feel unsafe. And honestly, in that moment, I was done digging the mine. Like I was going nowhere. And had I not felt an obligation to a handful of people that I'd hired that cared about having a job and a paycheck,
right,
I would have handed over the keys and walked out.
Wow.
And fortunately, I felt like I couldn't do that. And because 6 months later, I said, I am having the experience of a lifetime. And I asked myself that exact question. It's like, at what point do you give up and say this was a failure? And I would say it takes more art than science. But on one occasion, I made the mistake of staying too long. And I understand that looking back at it. And on many occasions, I made the mistake of quitting too early. And I do have, and again, it's like there's a lot of logic that's going on up here in your mind, but there's also a lot of instinct and heart and sort of connection to your own soul that I think evaluating is really helpful. But my experience in this case was that as I have gone through hard things in life, and some of them you don't have a choice. I mean, like sometimes adversity is thrown at us. But I look at those moments that felt the deepest, that felt the most difficult, and they just felt overwhelming. Like those burdens felt huge. And I was actually closer to like breaking through in what I was doing and closer to a moment of like personal victory or success. And so it's an ambiguous answer, but I think it's, as I think about generationally, and like we're a very young company in terms of who we hire. Millennials are no longer the young bucks that they once were. But I've hired a lot of millennial, Gen Z, and you look at their resumes, and it's like, boy, you've only been out of college for 4 years, and like it looks like you've experienced the world professionally. And so, they're somewhere in the balance of, I've been here 6 months and it's not working out, and I've been here 4 years and I just can't seem to find my rhythm. It's like you charge hard and then you make a decision. But I also think that one of the barometers for we oftentimes measure the wrong things, and I've learned that in my career. Good. When I'm measuring my own personal enjoyment, like my own success, my own paycheck, when it's all about me, I kind of lose out on what actually makes a career special and meaningful. And so that's one of these changed perspective, which is when the whole world revolves around me, you kind of like, you don't want to stay and grind much longer because like the easiest thing to do is go. But that's a perspective that I think everyone's got to sort of figure out along the way.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm a millennial, and I think it's just a general feeling amongst us that the world does revolve around us. And that's what we were taught, right? That's the way we grew up, is things were instant for us. Now we were on the beginning wave of social media and life being easier than that way, but that's kind of where our formative years were built, was that instant gratification. And so now when something doesn't work out in 6 months, you think either I'm dumb, I'm not doing it right, or I need to go find something else.
Or maybe you're just soft.
Or maybe I'm just soft.
Maybe that's what it is.
There's some of that too, right?
Yeah.
Right. No, you're exactly right. I haven't truly gone through anything.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't saying you are soft.
It's all good.
But
I need to hear it.
You didn't have to, Jeremy. We were all thinking it.
You do have to go through hard things in life. And I mean, for me, I've gone through it. My hardest things have actually been professional, and like personal and professional lives really, they're kind of one and the same. When you care so much about what you do professionally, like it's hard to say, okay, get in the car. That was a crappy day, but let's go. Life is good. And so I do think that there's something about experiencing hard things, and those are the things that make you stronger. Mm-hmm. And it's cliche to say, but when you're in the middle of adversity, it sucks, you hate it, and you just want to be done with that. Mm-hmm. But I am finding the more I go through it in my career. And by the way, I'm in the middle of a tough moment right now. Like our business is complicated with global supply chain.
Yeah.
Like it's a total nightmare. And yet my perspective went from 10 years ago, like this sucks, this is heavy, I hate this, to this is a pretty interesting problem to solve that's never happened in the history of the world. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this can be written one of two ways. It can be a success or a failure. So we're going to write the success. And I'm going to be intrigued by this problem that I get to solve, because not only does it not feel so heavy, but I start to enjoy the challenge, and I can actually learn from a difficult moment as opposed to just wanting to be done with it.
Yeah. And that's sort of similar. I'm listening to your story. You talked about earlier that, you made the decision to continue on with Traeger because you owed some people that came with you, right? And now you're going through somewhat of a, with supply chain, there's a lot going on there. And look, there's a community of us and hundreds of thousands of people who count on you now that are within your community. So you can't quit. Your ass better get up every day and work, man.
You know, so that's an interesting comment. And I want to share a story about, well, let's see, the week of March 13th, 2020, which was a Friday, was a Friday. And, you know, it was 4 days after Rudy Gobert from the Jazz, my home team. It's like, this is when this COVID-19 just started blowing up. And we huddled in this office right here for 4 days straight, trying to figure out what our go-forward plan was going to be. And that was a heavy moment because I didn't know if people would stop buying expensive grills. We had a lot of debt on the business at the time. And I didn't know if we were going to get product from, like, there were all sorts of unknowns. And I remember getting like 3 or 4 days in this conversation. We said, you know what? We've got this community of people that really care about this brand. And so maybe we should be turning this on its head a little bit and saying, why don't we think about our community? You know, we're scared. Everyone is scared. No one knows exactly what's going on. And we're going to figure out how we be part of this solution. We can no longer go out and do shop classes and cook and bring food, but we can get into people's backyards through technology. And we started this Traeger Kitchen Live, which was, you know, it's an hour cooking show. And we're having like 150,000 people a week in the afternoon, like during the workday. Thank you very much.
I certainly wasn't one of those.
Well, I was. Like, glued to this thing. And it was interesting to think, you know what, let's not be in this just for us. Let's do something positive for our community. And it's the first time that I've ever thought about business quite that way, and where we've said our community relies on us and on each other, and we rely on them. And I will tell you that, like, watching and we sort of we coined during the pandemic the Traeger hood, because like we're watching this from the outside, like almost from the outside, like we own the brand, we run the brand, but we're watching our community members bond together over social media in their neighborhood. And we were talking earlier on about, you know, finding the good in humanity. And like the pandemic certainly brought out some bad in humanity, but I also think it brought out some good in humanity. And one of those things was community. You walk down the street and a family's walking together, and, you know, they've been quarantined. And so they see a neighbor. It's like, how are you? It's like they actually care, and they're going to stop and listen in response. And so, you know, I was so blown away by how the Traeger community interacted with each other. And there was like one post in particular, you know, this woman posted a picture of this amazing brisket with a phrase underneath. In the post, it said, "Stay calm and Traeger on."
Oh man!
And so hashtag Traeger on. That was like, that got our community through the pandemic, and it was an interesting moment. And by the way, I just think that's part of what ultimately makes a career and life more meaningful. Is that, you know what? Life and careers by definition are a little bit self-serving. Like, we've lived with our thoughts and our ambitions and our motivations our entire life. And so we see the world through our own lenses. But when you start to care as much about other people and about their journey, they feel that. And by the way, it's so much more satisfying when you authentically care for someone else and they sense that, than it is having your own success, your notch on the belt, whatever it is. And so, you know, that's something that we learned during the pandemic, and it's really changed how we think about, you know, being leaders and building culture that looks out for our people.
Let's talk about that. And you're sort of answering it, but from a leadership perspective, you know, the head of the company, the head of the business, everybody looks to you. In that moment, How difficult was that? Because I'm sure behind closed doors, you're sitting there worried and thinking, worst case scenarios and whatnot. How did you stand strong and be a good leader in that moment for your team when they needed you most?
So look, fortunately, I've learned by experience, and in an earlier life as CEO, I was like confident. I pretended I was confident about everything, and even if I was like scared out of my mind trying to figure it out, and I think there's something about authenticity and leadership that really matters, and people know when you're not being honest with them. And so, fortunately, I do have, a good deal of self-confidence and enough experience that I have pattern recognition, which by pattern recognition in business and in life is so much more valuable than reading 1,000 books and case studies. Like, you have to experience to make good decisions. And so there's enough of that, but I was also able to express what I didn't know. And what worried me. And I found that by doing that, a couple of things happen. Number one, everyone says, okay, we're in this together.
Right.
And thank you for thank you for saying you're going to look out for us. But thank you for acknowledging that this is going to take all of us, as a community, like living our cultural values, looking out for our people. I mean, we were less than a week into going home from the pandemic when we had an earthquake in Utah. Like, earthquakes don't happen.
I was going to say, that is not the Pacific Rim. I know that.
I've never heard of it. And I'm in the basement on my spin bike at 7:12 in the morning, and my house starts shaking. And I couldn't get off because I was setting a personal record.
I mean, priorities, but
my family's freaking out upstairs. I eventually go upstairs.
You save yourselves.
You can't let anything get in the way of the gains. I've learned that.
And I eventually, I wasn't going to get to the end of the 30 minutes when I started hearing people like pitter patter upstairs.
Yeah.
But, we reached out to our leadership team and we said, hey, remember we said we're going to touch base with our people working from their bedrooms and living rooms, and not to see how productive are you, but how are you? And this is when we doubled down on that. And it was interesting that stood up and said, here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. But I'm one guy, and this leadership team is a handful of people. So we need everyone to pitch in this moment. And I think that really, as a leader, when you say, I'm going to carry the load and I'm going to lead you, but I don't have all the answers. People don't look at vulnerable circumstances if they respect you. They don't think less of you. They don't take advantage of you. I actually think they say, okay, I'm going to step up and I'm going to help, as opposed to just take me there.
Yeah. And it's literally so funny you said that. We were talking about this right before we got on with you. We're just kind of reflecting and we're going through Jocko Willick's book, Extreme Ownership. And
I love that guy.
Oh, the best. But we're talking about, own your world and own everything. But then also too is we're talking about the pandemic, and imagine a scenario where the leadership of our country, whether it be, and again, this is not to get political, but the CDC or the FDA or our, elected officials went up and says, hey, we don't know everything. Here's what we do know. And we're working through this. We're going to need time. We're going to need help, as opposed to giving out answers. Hey, 3 weeks, then this, and then this, and then this, and then answers change. And imagine the difference in division between the country on one side or the other, however you feel, had a leader just kind of gone up there and just say, hey, listen, we're figuring this out with you. We don't have all the answers. Here's what we do know, but we are investing and we're working our tails off to find as much information as fast as we can. I mean, how different would that have been?
I'm dying for that moment. And by the way, we have such a crisis of leadership right now. Yes. And part of it is what you said. Everyone suggests they know, but it's interesting when you get on the other side of politics. you actually realize how little they know.
Right.
And how like everyone's an expert on an issue that you could spend your whole life studying and not be an expert on.
Yeah.
But the other piece that that I find disappointing as a citizen, as I'm looking at this, is it's not just about what they say, but it's recognizing that there are motivations that are actually not necessarily for your own good.
Yeah.
And every once in a while you have a rare leader who is also a politician, and you say, this person doesn't care what anyone thinks. They say what they believe, and if you don't like it, that's just fine. But look, I think it's a real shame that we don't have more of that.
Yeah, and it's people, like you said, people see if you're authentic or not, and I think the public can see, leaders within their business organization, with their school, within the government. People can tell when there's authentic care for others.
100%.
And I wish we had more of that.
I want to take another quick break. And speaking of breaks, I want to thank our sponsor, Sleep Number, who gives you the best break of every single day of your life, which is sleep. And what they're doing with their technology and their mattresses is second to none. They have taken the mattress game and put it on steroids.
Yeah.
They check your heart rate, your circadian rhythm. They're doing all these different things to test you while you're sleeping to make sure that it's custom and that every single night is the most restorative, restful sleep that you're ever going to get.
It's no accident that Sleep Number is the official sleep partner of the NFL, and because NFL athletes are at the top when it comes to recovery, when it comes to taking care of your body, and nothing is more important than sleep. We've talked about it on the show multiple times, making sure you take care of your sleep. And there's a reason that Dak Prescott sleeps on one every single night. And there's a reason that his career has blossomed the way that it has. So make sure either you go online, sleepnumber.com, you go into a local store, they're going to walk you through it. You're going to experience the entire process of understanding what your sleep score is, or what your sleep number is, and then ultimately showing you how to achieve the highest sleep score, because that's what's important, is how you actually sleep and how you recover so that you can tackle the day with everything that you have.
Yeah, it's a VIP experience that we're all looking for.
That's
so
right.
That's sleepnumber.com. Like Tyler said, go get yourself to a local store and get yourself that VIP experience. Now back to the episode.
I agree.
So let's go into this crisis where you're at now. You went through an organization that you took from $1 million in revenue to 300 and took it public, and you accomplished a lot of things on paper. You've said in other interviews that, hey, I didn't really know what I was doing. And I look back and I was kind of, like you said, I was kind of faking it. And then now you're learning, all of those experiences have led to what you're doing now and what you've done at Traeger. And I think, again, another interview, you said, if I were to look at myself 6 months ago, I didn't know anything 6 months ago compared to what I know now. But the humility to admit that. But you're in a very unique time that even 2 years ago didn't think that you would be, right?
Yeah.
And I know, like you said, you created something different through the pandemic, and I'm a little bit of a dork and went through some SEC filings, and you had really good years, right? In 20 and 21, right? And there was amazing growth. And then now you're faced with this supply chain issue where we can't get materials, we can't get products, things are stuck at the port. We can't get the distribution out through the United States. It's taking too long to get to customers. I mean, the challenges are endless for product companies, right? It's insane. And so as you're navigating through this, and I love the fact that you're taking the challenge, you're like, hey, look, I'm actually looking forward to the adversity here. But what are these next steps for you personally as a leader, and then Traeger as a company?
So first of all, first interview ever where someone acknowledged they had gone through SEC filings.
He is a meathead, but he's smart.
There's a lot to learn if you're willing to take the time. You know what? It's one of the reasons why I came back to do this again is that I wanted to learn to be a better business leader, better CEO. And I look back on my experience at Skull Candy, and I sort of said, like, I'm so far from being who I want to be as a business leader that that's an interesting motivation. So my motivation every single day is to get better. It's to see progress, like full stop. Number two, it's to create an environment where people can become their best selves. And we spend so much time working that I think any legacy around shareholder value, stock price, P&L, those aren't legacies that anyone cares about. But the legacy of looking back and saying, my 4 years at Traeger changed the trajectory of my life. What I learned, like the personal trait that I learned on the job, made me better husband, better father, better community member. Like those are the two things that drive me. And so with that in mind, I look at us in the middle of this moment, and it's complicated. And it's actually really interesting because it's a little bit of a tale of two businesses here. Traeger as a brand and a community is super healthy, and it's growing as fast as we can hold on for dear life. And that's awesome. Somehow we're having a hard time making more money as we grow. And that's because transportation costs have gone up, not by 50%, but by 8 times since the second quarter. And so I look at this and I say, two things. Number, if we can solve this, we can solve anything because this is complicated. The other, and there's, Clayton Christensen, who was a professor at Harvard Business School, and someone who became a friend that I admired so much. One of the things he talked about was, when your back is against the wall, when you are in a moment of crisis, you will learn to innovate like no other moment because you have to. Yep. And there's this phrase I love, which is don't let a good crisis go to waste. Like make something from it. And so as a business leader right now, I'm thinking, okay, we've got multiple things that we've got to solve for. The first is we've got to solve for today. We've got to ship product. It's got to be high quality. We've got to make payroll, pay our factories, grow the business. The next thing I have to solve for is all of the long-term investments of this brand. And that means product innovation. I have to continue to invest in better product because although I may not get paid for it for 3 years, I stop now, 3 years from now really hurts. Right. We've got to fuel the brand, all the cooking content, that stuff's expensive, the marketing content. Because I've got to protect the future, even while I manage the near term, which is painful. But then I got to make sure I protect my people and my culture at the same time. Right. And doing all three of those things is difficult. What most people do, what most or many business leaders do is they focus on the first one. I'm going to protect the moment. I'm going to protect the quarter. I may sell us down the river in the future, but at least I get past this moment. And in the process of, so I've already, I've already sub-optimized my future. But in the process of doing that, I'm going to put so much weight on my team that I'm going to break them. I'm going to break the culture. I'm going to make this an experience that makes them sick to their stomach when they come into the office on a Monday morning. And so, I think about the complexity of managing these three different objectives, all of which are mutually exclusive. In theory, you can't do them all perfectly. And so we set out every day with those three objectives in mind, and we need to balance, and we need to make trade-offs, and we make trade-offs. We need to be honest about what trade-offs we're making. So I'll tell you, this is I'm glad I didn't face this problem 10 or 15 years ago, because I would have been a deer in the headlights. And I'm actually, because I take a long-term view on a business like this, I can't solve the global macroeconomic issues this quarter because I'm not responsible for them. But I can reinvent the business in a moment of crisis in the future while protecting what we're doing today.
You sound like you are in a position now in your life, just through all your experiences, that you're you're kind of enjoying the moment. You're enjoying the journey.
I am. And you know what? That's so important to me because I spent so much of my career not enjoying the journey. And I hate to say that because I'm an optimistic, happy person, but I was always so focused and so ambitious and so hardworking that it was hard for me to appreciate the moments that I was in because I was always focused on where I was going. And, you know, I have learned that the only thing to look forward to at the end of your career is retirement. And like, I don't want that. And so if I can't enjoy this, like what's the point? Yeah. And I think that way about life. And I remember my co-founder of Skull Candy was the majority partner. He brought me in and I wanted to be I was the president. He was the CEO. I wanted to be the CEO so badly. I mean, like I could taste it. And I just said, I'm going to keep working and grinding. I'm going to create so much value and eventually it'll be obvious. And eventually I became the CEO. And I remember getting that news. I was in Eastern Europe on business. And I was elated. And then 48 hours later, I said, it doesn't feel any different. and that was important to me because I didn't enjoy so many of those moments. And people ask me all the time, what's next? And they think my response is coy when I say, this is it. Like, there's no next. Like, the grass beneath my feet is the greenest grass I can see. And I'm going to enjoy this moment because I'm not getting any younger. And it would be really sad for me to look back 20 years from now and say, I wish I enjoyed it more. And I will tell you, there's a much overused Chinese proverb, overused by me, which is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. And this is one of those things that I learned a handful of years ago in my career, and I'm determined to never not enjoy a moment, regardless of how complicated it may be. And it's funny because I've had some criticism from public investors, which is like, this will blow your mind. And running a public company is not easy and it takes thick skin. When you're private, everyone just writes these really nice things about your company. And then the moment you file an S1 to go public, everyone suddenly has mean things to say about you. And I got some feedback from some investors that, you know, on my social, like I do social media. And I am an introverted person, which is like kind of a weird place to be as a CEO, but I'm introverted and I do social media to communicate with the Traegerhood, with my community. And the feedback was, you know what, your stock price is down and you just look happy, like with your family, like it's almost like nothing's going on. And it was a criticism. And I was very taken back and I said, hey, listen, I just want you to know that I take my stewardship of your capital very seriously. I know that money's not a scorecard for me, but as an investor for you, I respect the fact that it is. And I am doing everything and I feel that weight and I feel that burden, but I don't think being unhappy and frowning, you know, over a big, beautiful brisket with my boys learning to cut a slice of brisket, I don't think it's going to make me any better. And I think it's just really important to acknowledge that life can be hard, but it doesn't have to make us angry and unhappy at the same time.
I love that. I know we want to be respectful of your time here, but I want to shift to, you've mentioned a couple of times, you know, I love hiking up mountains. You're cycling, you know, self-care. You have a lot on your plate professionally, but as it relates to physical care, to mental health, and one thing I want to call out that it sounds like you innately do is you've separated your identity. Jeremy Andrus is your identity is not CEO. Your identity is not what the revenue of Traeger is. That doesn't directly relate to your value as a person. And I love that. I love that just innately happens. But how important is it to you to really focus on yourself, to fill your cup back up so you can continue? Because again, we haven't even talked about the fact that you have 6 kids. You have a set of twins at the very back end. I have twins as well. It was our last one. So I get it. So family time and really focusing on the things that really, and I would say that's the true legacy, right? that is what's going to make an impact on this world much longer than you being the CEO of Traeger. Not that that's not important.
Listen, I couldn't agree more. My kids love Traeger, and it's like it's family to them. Yeah. But they don't care what dad does for a living. They may look back and say dad worked hard and that was cool, but dad didn't prioritize the business over us. I love what you said, first of all, around where you find your identity and like your foundation as a human being. Because I haven't always been that way. Career was so important to me, from such a young age, long before I had a career, that it was my identity for a while. And that wasn't good for me. And it wasn't good for me for a couple of reasons. One is, when your identity can be yanked out from under you by someone else like that, it's like, what do you have? And then you say, I have so much else, but like, I feel like my life has been robbed from me. And so your core has to be something that you own and can never be taken from you. But the second thing that I realized, and this is after I left Skull Candy, I was unhealthy. I was working 7 days a week. I remember my wife telling me I was a single guy living in my parents' basement, got married, went to Skull Candy. And my wife telling me that she was driving in Park City with our two young daughters, 4 and 2 years old. And our 4-year-old said, "Look, Mom, that's where Dad lives." And I'm like, oh, Dad, you're like, no. I know that's not what she meant. It's like, no. She actually did. And like, thank you for being honest as a child. And I did it so much that I was unhealthy and I was physically unhealthy. I couldn't work out in the morning because I was so tired. It was like I went to bed at 2 a.m. working, and 3 a.m. I had like a kid's waking up and I'm like trying to put a bottle in her mouth or rock her back to sleep. I was mentally unhealthy. I was spiritually unhealthy. And I remember looking at that and saying, I'll never be here again. Like this is not what life is about. And I didn't realize in the moment, but I started doing yoga more for sort of meditation reasons than anything. I started to get in good physical shape. And then I started to analyze what was important in my life. And I have this very strong belief that anything that is truly important to me in my life, I get done by 8 o'clock in the morning. And then I get to go hang out in the office and like in my man cave and do like super fun things. And so for me, that means up at 5. It means I don't turn this device on. I don't unlock my phone first thing. And I used to. It's like, boy, what happened in China? It's like, okay, we got a product moving out. And then suddenly I have no peace. And so my commitment is I wake up early before everyone else. I don't check my phone. I get a big, tall glass of hot water, and that's just my routine. And I sit in the dark. I drink my water. I listen to spiritual music. I read something that's meaningful to me. And I have a moment to be still and to meditate. And I didn't do that. And when I started doing that, I realized how important that was to me. By 6 a.m., I'm running up a mountain, or I'm lifting weights, or I'm on a mountain bike, whatever it may be. I do that until 7:15. I race upstairs and wake the kids up, or get the kids out of bed. I make a protein shake that has every nutrient in it that if I don't eat again until the next day, I'm going to be okay. I should drink, but I sit with my family. We read a scripture. We say a prayer. I drop them off at school, all 6 of them a half mile from here, and I'm in the office by 8:30. And what I realize is that when my day gets away from me, it's noisy and I can't think. I haven't done anything important, but I've done a lot of things. It's like I'm just taking action for progress. But if I can do everything that gives me my identity by 8 a.m, then suddenly like my days go sideways all the time. And at 6:30 at night, like my commitment is this laptop shuts at 6:30. I'm home with my family 11 minutes later, is that when my day goes sideways, I've done everything I need to do in the morning. And when I walk in the door, I put my phone in a cupboard. And by the way, I didn't always, and I don't always. And when I don't, I ask my kids to call me on that because I want to be present, because being a hero to my kids it's more important, but not always, but usually harder than like the next email or text that I feel like I should respond to at the dinner table.
Yeah. You know, you talk about identity, and we actually just got done reading the book Atomic Habits, and he talks about identity in that book. And he says, you know, it's shifting your mentality. And for your scenario, we're all three former athletes, and the shift was very hard for us because we saw ourselves as athletes and football players. Yeah. And one thing he talks about, and this applies to you, instead of saying I'm the CEO of Traeger, you say something like, I love to build, create, and lead people. That way, if you have that identity, that goes with you wherever you go. That goes with you with your family. That goes with you to your next career. It's not solidified in being the CEO of Traeger.
It's so perfectly said. And that's why I think as you're developing personal qualities along the way, you take those everywhere, and they're more than a financial result. If you forfeit or if you miss the opportunity to have an experience that helps you become a better person, but you have a nice financial business result, it's like you don't really take anything except what ends up in the bank. And I think that's a more intentional way to live, but I know it's a much more satisfying way to live as well.
That's great.
Yeah, well, we know we got to let you go. You got to get home to your family. This has been awesome, man. We could go on for hours, and
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and we're the
conversation.
Yeah, we're the biggest fans of Traeger. We're going to continue being the biggest fans. Yes. Again, not only because of the product, but because of the community and the family and what you guys stand for. And we really, really appreciate you.
Well, and I think the conclusion of this interview and this time to chat is it's not a surprise, right? It's not a surprise that the brand represents what it does, because, you know, you've got leaders behind it that believe in what they're doing and what they're preaching and are living it. So we thank you for that. We thank you for being you know, a leader in the business community, but your community and your family, because again, we talk about just the lack of leadership across the country, and it starts in the homes. And man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate. If I got anything that I'm most impressed about, is just your commitment, you know, to your family and to your kids.
You know what I'm most impressed about? When you started off, you talked about your investment into Traeger. You said we. You didn't say I. You said we. And
I got to tell you, we didn't get a chance to talk about where my strength comes from, but like my wife and I, everything we do, it's total team sport. Everything. Yeah. It's the best.
We didn't talk about it because we're going to trap you into another time. Coming back on with us, we're going to trap you into it. So
by the way,
that's the next episode.
Time, me and my wife at the same time. And,
yes, that's awesome.
We'll see the true force behind it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, hey, Jeremy, thank you so much. We really appreciate, man, the time, and we look forward to watching you. You got fans over here, and if there's anything that we can do to help from our side, we're here for you whenever.
Yeah, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
And tell Marcus Prentice to give us a call back, man. We're trying to get you guys.
We're gonna fix your supply chain issues. No, I'm just kidding. We're not gonna.
Please do.
We're gonna help. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Take care.